I never thought I'd see the day my own neighbors would turn against me. All because of a mailbox. What started as a petty complaint turned into a full-blown war, with the HOA accusing me of ruining the neighborhood's image. Within weeks, I was getting fines, threats, and even anonymous letters telling me to leave before it gets worse. But what they didn't know is that I wasn't backing down. Because behind their polished smiles and board meetings, I uncovered something far darker. Something they'd do anything to hide. So, how far would you go when your peaceful home turns into a battlefield? When I first moved into Willow Creek Estates, it felt like a dream. The streets were lined with perfectly trimmed hedges. Every house had the same clean white fences, and the neighbors waved with those polite, picture-perfect smiles you'd see in a real estate brochure. I'd worked for years to afford a home like this, quiet, safe, and built for peace of mind. For the first few months, that peace seemed real. I'd sip my morning coffee on the porch, listening to the soft hum of sprinklers and the distant chatter of dog walkers. My only real concern was whether to plant roses or hydrangeas along the front path. But in neighborhoods like this, perfection always comes with a price, and someone always makes sure you pay it. Started small. A note taped to my door one morning. Friendly reminder. Your trash cans must be stored out of sight within 12 hours of pickup. The handwriting was neat. No signature. Just the HOA's logo stamped at the bottom. I brushed it off. Rules were rules, right? Then came the second note. Grass exceeding approved height limit. Please mow immediately. Strange, since I just mowed the day before. A week later, another. Unapproved exterior decor. Remove at once. It was about a small wind chime my late wife had loved. That one stung. Still, I tried to be understanding. Maybe the board was strict. Maybe they just wanted to keep things tidy. But the tone of those letters, it wasn't about tidiness. It was about control. The neighbors began to act differently too. Mrs. Allen from across the street stopped waving. The couple next door, who used to chat about gardening, suddenly avoided eye contact. The air in the neighborhood shifted, quieter, colder, almost watched. And then one afternoon I saw her, the HOA president, clipboard in hand, standing on my lawn like she owned it. She was snapping photos of my driveway, my fence, even the mailbox, muttering something about violations. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about rules. This was personal. I didn't know it yet, but the fight that was coming would turn my dream home into a battlefield. Because in Willow Creek Estates, peace wasn't something you lived in, it was something you had to fight for. The first fine came 2 days later. A crisp white envelope on my doorstep, stamped in red. Notice of violation. Unauthorized lawn ornament, $150 penalty. The ornament they were talking about was my wife's wind chime, the same one they told me to take down. I hadn't yet. Not because I was being defiant, but because I couldn't bring myself to move it. It was the last piece of her I still heard every morning. I stared at the paper for a long time, my coffee growing cold in my hand. It wasn't about money. It was the principle that someone thought they had the right to tell me what belonged in my own home, in my own memory. I called the HOA office that afternoon. The woman who answered spoke with the kind of politeness that sounds more like mockery than manners. "Oh, Mr. Turner," she said sweetly. "The board just wants to maintain consistency in the neighborhood. I'm sure you understand." Consistency. That word would haunt me. By the next week, I'd received 2 more fines. One for having my recycling bin visible for longer than the approved window. Another for minor paint discoloration on the side fence. I walked around the house that evening, looking for what they were talking about. The paint looked fine. My bin had been out for maybe an hour too long. That's when I saw them. 2 board members, the president, Mrs. Grayson, and another man I didn't recognize. Standing across the street, clipboards in hand. They were pointing, whispering, taking photos. My stomach turned. It wasn't about rules. It was surveillance. The following week, I decided to attend the monthly HOA meeting. I wanted answers and maybe a bit of common sense. The community clubhouse was buzzing with polite chatter, coffee cups clinking, and the faint smell of disinfectant. When I walked in, conversations dipped just slightly, enough for me to notice. Mrs. Grayson sat at the center of the long table, flanked by her board. She smiled as if she'd been expecting me. "Ah, Mr. Turner," she said. "How lovely to see you take an interest in the community." I sat near the back, arms crossed, listening as they discussed everything from garden color palettes to garage door uniformity. The meeting was less about community and more about control, every sentence dripping with self-importance. Finally, during the open forum, I stood. "I've been getting repeated fines for things that aren't actual violations," I said, voice steady but loud enough to cut through the room. "I've checked the bylaws. There's nothing against wind chimes, and my fence is well within code." Mrs. Grayson gave a small, practiced laugh. "Mr. Turner, our job is to uphold the spirit of the rules, not just the letter." We all agreed the decor was disruptive to the visual harmony of the street. I felt every eye in the room on me. Some looked sympathetic. Others avoided contact entirely. That's when it hit me, no one wanted to cross her. I left that night with no resolution, just a thin smile and a reminder that further noncompliance could result in additional action. Then came the escalation. Letters turned into fines. Fines turned into threats. I started finding anonymous notes under my doormat. "People are watching. You're making this harder than it has to be." Someone even dumped a bag of mulch on my driveway, shredded with paper notes that read, "Obey." It was petty and deliberate. I installed security cameras. Within days, I received another letter. "Unauthorized exterior surveillance equipment. Violation of community privacy standards." They were now fining me for trying to protect myself. That night, as I sat watching the footage from my camera, I saw a shadowy figure walking up my lawn at 1:43 a.m. They lingered by my door, scribbled something, and slipped another envelope through the mail slot. Inside, final notice. Pending legal action for repeated noncompliance. No signature, just that familiar HOA logo. I tried to fight back, legally this time. I documented everything. I built a binder of letters, timestamps, photos. When I contacted the county housing department, they told me the HOA operated within independent community governance, meaning the county couldn't intervene without clear evidence of harassment. That word, clear evidence, echoed in my head, so I decided to get it. Over the next few weeks, I started recording everything: HOA meetings, phone calls, even casual run-ins with Mrs. Grayson. What I uncovered was worse than I'd expected. Emails from board members, mocking homeowners, approving targeted enforcement, and even discussing ways to encourage turnover of non-conforming residents. It wasn't about violations. It was about pushing people out. And my name was on that list. The next HOA meeting was different. Tension buzzed like static. As soon as I walked in, Mrs. Grayson's smile vanished. "Mr. Turner, this is a closed session," she said sharply. "Not according to the bylaws," I replied. "All homeowners are entitled to attend." Murmurs spread through the crowd. I could see a few neighbors, the same ones who once ignored me, now watching with quiet curiosity, maybe even hope. I waited until the end of the meeting. Then I stood again. "I have proof," I said, pulling out the printed emails. "Proof that this board has been deliberately targeting residents, approving fake fines, and breaking its own rules." The room erupted. Gasps, whispers. Mrs. Grayson's face went pale. She tried to regain control, pounding the gavel. "That's confidential information. You have no right." "No," I interrupted. "You have no right to intimidate homeowners for your own gain." For a moment, everything was chaos. People shouting, phones recording, the illusion of control shattering right there under fluorescent lights. But if I thought exposing them would end it, I was wrong. The next morning, I found my mailbox smashed. My front gate, spray-painted with the word "troublemaker." The security footage was grainy, just a dark SUV speeding off into the night. I called the police. They took a report, nodded politely, and left. "Could be vandalism," they said. "Hard to prove connection." That's when I realized I wasn't just fighting the HOA anymore. I was fighting a system built to protect itself. Mrs. Grayson filed a formal complaint accusing me of harassment and disruptive conduct. They claimed my emails, my recordings, my behavior had created a hostile environment for the board. I was fined again, this time for defamation. It was surreal. Every step I took to defend myself became another weapon used against me. But by then, I wasn't backing down. I started gathering signatures from neighbors, quietly, door to door. At first, people were hesitant, scared. But one by one, they opened up, telling me about their own fines, their own letters, the same quiet bullying that had driven others to move away. By the end of the week, I had a dozen homeowners ready to stand up with me. We filed a motion to recall the entire HOA board. That night, as I walked back home, something strange happened. The wind was still, the streetlights dim. But for the first time in months, I felt calm. Like the fear had burned out and left something sharper, purpose. The wind chime on the porch rattled softly. I looked at it, the one thing they tried so hard to erase, and realized this was never just about rules or appearances. It was about people like Mrs. Grayson needing control, and people like me learning how to take it back. But the war wasn't over, because the next morning, I opened my mailbox and found a thick envelope, heavier than the rest. Inside was a formal letter from the HOA attorney. Effective immediately, your property is subject to lien proceedings for unpaid fines totaling $9,875. They were trying to take my home,